Hey everyone, Janessa here from the blog almostheavenhomesteading.com, and it is late summer now, which means that we have some new seasonal flavors coming into the kitchen. And with that, I want to show you how to make a healthy version of an apple crisp. And be sure to stick around for the second half of this video as well, because I'm going to be showing you how you can use those apple peelings and cores from the apples for the apple crisp to make your own homemade apple cider vinegar, which is so easy, takes 3 ingredients, and almost no hands-on time. So let's jump into this apple crisp and then stay tuned for that apple cider vinegar. Alright, so to get started making this apple crisp, I am going to be greasing an 8x12 baking dish with a thin layer of butter. And this is just to keep the apples from sticking. And then I'm going to jump straight into quartering, coring, and peeling my Granny Smith apples. I love using a Granny Smith apple for this recipe, or any apple that is more on the tart side, because I love how that counteracts the slight sweetness of the crumble on top. But if you are more into just a really sweet dessert dish, then you could certainly opt for a much sweeter apple if you wanted to. I would suggest going with a crisper apple, however, and not one that is going to turn mushy really easy in the baking process. So anyway, I am using 6 to 8 Granny Smith apples here. I believe I did 8 because mine were smaller, and I'm quartering them, cutting the cores out, and then peeling the apple quarters. Then I'm just going to slice them really thin. I'll want about 5 or 6 pieces per quarter so that I have really thin slices, and I'm just going to be adding those to the bottom of my baking dish as I go along. I'm going for about an inch thick layer of apple slices at the bottom of my baking dish before I head into preparing the crumble. So next I'm going to be preparing the crumble to go on top of those apple slices. Now the crumble is made up of 1½ cups rolled oats, 1/2 cup of flour, 1/4 cup of maple sugar, 1/2 tablespoon of cinnamon, and 1/2 cup or 1 stick of cold butter that's been cut into cubes. So I'm just going to add all of that to a large bowl, and I'm going to use a fork to kind of mix all this together gently. I'm not turning it into a dough or anything like that. I'm just incorporating it enough to where it's a nice crumbly texture that will evenly spread over the apples. So here I'm just cubing that butter so that it will become a little easier to work with as I'm trying to incorporate this. And then I'm just going to mix all of this together, and then I'm going to pour this over my apple slices before we move on to the next step. And just a side note here, you can use whatever sugar you want for this recipe. I love using maple sugar in most of my desserts or baked goods, and that's just because it is a less refined, more of a natural sweetener, and so I love using that as a substitute for cane sugar or brown sugar. I find that I can pretty much do that with any recipe with no problems. You could actually also use honey for this, that would be perfectly fine, or even maple syrup if you just have that on hand. Or you could even just use a regular cane sugar or brown sugar if you're not trying to avoid some of those more refined sweeteners. It's totally your preference on the sugar. Alright, so one final step that I love to do at the end of preparing this apple crisp before it's ready to go into the oven is to melt another 1/4 cup or 1/2 stick of butter in a small saucepan and drizzle that over the top before it goes into the oven. And then the apple crisp will be ready to be baked for 40 to 50 minutes in a 350-degree oven before you are ready to enjoy this delicious dessert or even healthy breakfast option. finished up with that apple crisp and it is going into the oven. Let's get started making this homemade apple cider vinegar. So apple cider vinegar, I'm sure you know, is a fermented food. And a fermented food needs something for the good bacteria to feed on. In this case, that's going to be sugar. Now, by the time that the fermentation process is finished, there's going to be virtually no sugar left in this. I'm sure you've heard before that apple cider vinegar is a health food. Some even would call it a superfood, and so you might be thinking that sugar and health foods don't work together. But when this is finished, there'll be almost no sugar left because the good bacteria has consumed it all and turned it into a healthy fermented product. So I'm going to show you the first steps, and then I'm going to take you along with me throughout the week as I am continuing to do some different steps and into the next couple weeks after that to get this finished up. So let's get started on the apple cider vinegar. So the product that we are making today with these apple peelings and cores is actually apple scrap vinegar, not apple cider vinegar. They're similar. Apple cider vinegar, however, is made from apple cider that has been fermented over time through the natural yeasts and sugar in the apples. This apple scrap vinegar is a little bit weaker than apple cider vinegar, but it's still such a great product to have on hand. And best of all, it is a great way to use up a seemingly useless product that you have left over in the apple peelings and cores. So anyway, we are going to be making this apple cider vinegar, or apple scrap vinegar as it is actually called, by adding those apple scraps to a half-gallon jar. And you'll want the half-gallon jar to be filled pretty much all the way to the top. And then we are going to be adding in a 1/4 cup of cane sugar. Then we're going to top this off with enough water to almost fill the jar. You'll want a little bit of headspace because there's going to be some bubbling going on as this ferments. And then we're just going to let this set. What we want to do is stir this once a day or twice a day. Twice a day is actually better. And then over time, this is going to turn into vinegar. So this process takes a few weeks from start to finish. And early on in the fermentation process, the sugar is being consumed and being converted into ethanol alcohol. This is the first step in the fermentation process. Now the second step is the final step where the ethanol alcohol is converted into acetic acid, and this is also when the mother develops. So this does take a little while. This is going to take 2 to 3 weeks for this to fully turn into vinegar as it is sitting on your counter. You don't want to stop the process too soon, or you'll be left with more of like a hard cider than an apple cider vinegar. So just let this set and be sure to stir this once or twice a day very thoroughly. And then after this few weeks, all you need to do is strain all of those apple peelings and cores through some cheesecloth, and you are left with an apple scrap vinegar that you can use in salad dressings or all kinds of different recipes that you would normally use an apple cider vinegar for. I wouldn't suggest using the apple scrap vinegar for canning, as you might not have quite the acid level that you need and that you would get in a true apple cider vinegar. But other than that, this is a completely useful product that is shelf stable, and it actually has a really good taste to it. If you just add a little bit to water, it is healthy and it flavors your water, and it's really good. So I hope you all enjoyed learning how to make this healthier apple crisp and how to make this no waste apple scrap vinegar. If you would consider subscribing to our channel and liking this video, we would appreciate that so much. And as usual, thank you so much for stopping by our homestead, and I will see you all next week. Bye.
Thank you.